Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the London Archives. My name is Tom, and I'm an engagement learning officer here at the Archives. And this is Zoe here, who's helping with the tech this afternoon. This is a hybrid event, so welcome for joining. Welcome for those who joined us in person. Thank you for braving the warm weather. It's nice and cool in here, so I hope it was worth it, and we get to see and hear about a very lovely document. And welcome to those who've joined us at home as well. Hope you're managing to stay suitably cool somewhere as well. So the reason we've got today, we'll be spending about 45 minutes, something like that, looking at some of the early maps of London. The reason that we're talking about early maps of London is I'm very happy to say that it's on display at the moment here at the London Archives. As we'll hear, this is Civitas Londinium, also known as the woodcut map and the Agas map as well, slightly older way of describing it. And this is one of the earliest, not quite the earliest, we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, one of the earliest maps of London, and a particularly fine thing that we're very lucky to have here. It's on display until, well, I should know this, until December in our iconic display area alongside October, excuse me. This is one of the many things that Zoe helps me out with, till October. So it's on display till October, excuse me, in our iconic display area alongside the so-called Shakespeare's Deed, which is one of only six examples of Shakespeare's signature and recounts a property transaction that he bought in Blackfriars. And if you're interested in that, there will be a little bit of a talk about that in September as well. But basically, it's a chance for us to sort of delve a little bit into sort of early modern London. So today we'll be hearing a little bit about what this map shows us and its relationship to some of the other sort of earliest maps of London. Hello there, welcome. Before we carry on, I should say that it's fine to ask questions, but I ask you just to do so at the end. If you're joining us at home, please just put the questions in the chat, and we'll answer questions at the end of the talk from both people here in person and at home as well. And a little disclaimer I like to give actually is that I'm not an expert on this or really anything else, I'm afraid. So as an engagement learning officer, it's my job to sort of know a little bit about a lot about the things we have in our collection. So I've been as diligent as I can with the research. It's a fascinating topic. If you have any really particularly hard technical questions, I'm very happy to try and answer them, but I might have to go back to the source of the archives if they're particularly fiendish or cartographical or something like that. So as I said, this is on display until October, and the map that you can see before you goes by several names really. Historically, it used to be called the Agas map. That's the name that you might be familiar with, that you read about in quite a lot of the literature. And Agas is a spurious, an incorrect attribution to a surveyor called Ralph Agas, who was thought for a long time to have created this map. We now know that's not the case. So you generally now hear it called either Civitas Londinium, that's what we tend to call it here now, Civitas Londinium, or sometimes the woodcut map as well. Those are the names that you will hear, and we'll talk a little bit more, in a fair bit more detail actually, about sort of what makes this map as we go on. But it's probably just worth mentioning at this stage that it doesn't perhaps look entirely like a map as we see them today. We're perhaps most used to maps being that straight top-down view, kind of a flat view. And one of the really intriguing and charming things about this map, and actually sort of the family of maps that we'll be looking at, is they have this sort of something called a bird's eye view, or you can think of it as a three-quarter view. So not only do they give a sense of the layout of the city and the city in the kind of the broad sense of the term, but they also give a sense of its topography and its buildings, and even some of its sort of inhabitants and kind of comings and goings as well, which I think makes it a particularly charming document. But we're going to leave Civitas Londinium behind for a few slides and go a little bit earlier and talk about the so-called Copperplate map. Not a particularly original name. The Copperplate map is so called because it only survives in the forms of copper plates, and 3 copper plates to be precise. So the copperplate map is thought to be is the earliest map of London. It doesn't survive in full, unfortunately. So scholars believe there are probably 15 plates originally that comprise the copperplate map, and only, as I say, only 3 survive to this day. And it's worth stressing that what has survived isn't sort of the printed map itself; it's the printing plates that would have been used to create it. And they survived not as the plates themselves. They survived serendipitously because they were used to back paintings. They were used to back other paintings. One was the Tower of Babel, and the other was the Assumption and Coronation of the Virgin. And these were only discovered in the 1960s. Both of those 2 copper plates reside in the Museum of London. Used to be on display in their Tudor gallery, and I'm not sure what the plans are for displaying them, since the museum is being and has been refurbished. And then a third plate was discovered in the 1990s, in a German museum. And once again, this is as a backing for a painting of the Tower of Babel. So if you happen to have a painting of the Tower of Babel at home, just do me a favour and have a quick look on the back, just to be sure there isn't a copperplate map lurking. So we'll look at 2 of the 3 plates today, because those are the ones that we have access to. Because of the London collection through the Museum of London, being part of the same family. So on the screen here we can see the north sheet of the copperplate map, and those things that I alluded to in the introduction are already far clearer. So it is a map in the sense that it's been surveyed. There's a roughly accurate and consistent scale that has been employed. So in that sense, it's very familiar to us as a map, but it's not familiar in the sense of it contains lots of features we probably wouldn't expect a map to have. Although maybe I'm a bit out of date saying that, because actually Google Maps and similar now do actually employ a similar topographical view. So perhaps that's an idea of the more of things coming round again. So as I say, this is the north sheet of the copperplate map. So just to orientate you can see the north wall of the city there. That's Moorgate at the bottom, and you get this nice sense from this map how the city is still bounded by the walls, much smaller, less sprawling than it is today. And then we can see in the fields there the various inhabitants of London going about their business. So both sort of people, human inhabitants. We can see the laundry or the cloth being hung up there. We'll talk a bit more about that later on. Going up, we can see people practicing archery or taking a stroll, and we can see various livestock as well. I did mention that this map was accurate in terms of its scale, or roughly accurate in scale, and I should say by that I mean the sort of the ground plot is roughly accurate. But what isn't accurate isn't necessarily the scale of the people and the inhabitants. As I'm sure that's you perhaps don't need me to point that out. I suppose I'm pointing out that I realise it's not accurate. I'm sure you would have realised that. And I say we'll come back a bit more to some of the inhabitants and what they may or may not mean as we go on. So this is the north sheet of the copperplate map. And then by good luck, really, the other one that survives in the Museum of London collections is actually an adjoining sheet. So we've got a north and south sheet of the city. I don't know if there's some deeper reason why they both survive, but I think actually it's just a coincidence. And actually you can see this image is very dense, and it's perhaps hard to make out all of the detail on this slide, but it does show, I think, the advantage of this three-quarter view. It's less concerned with the layout of the streets and more concerned with the kind of the feel of the city, what the city looked like. And as an aside and a digression, the standard that we're used to of maps today, of it being this sort of this flat 2D view, comes in after the Great Fire of London, and there the priority was have an accurate representation of the ground plot for kind of insurance and sort of financial purposes. So as I say, this is the south sheet of the copperplate map. So the north one will be up there, obviously, and then we get a sense of the river along here as well. And there's some interesting little details on the bottom. We can see the boats, but we also see these oxen that are in the Thames. This might just be that they were being sort of fairly loose in their illustrations. Again, this isn't trying to be 100% accurate, or this might be some scholars have read this as as a way of showing that the Thames is tidal at this stage, and that the foreshore was sometimes used and rich as well. So, like anything of this age, sort of various interpretations kind of can and do exist. This is one of those moments where I start to feel a bit old, because I used to sort of say that we're used to seeing perhaps maps as navigation aids rather as display objects, but I think today that's not true at all. Most of us don't use maps to navigate, and certainly generations kind of below me and younger than me probably would have to have a very special reason to do so. The normal standard thing that we do to navigate is with our devices, and we tend to see maps now as something of a novelty. So again, this is an example of things perhaps going back to things as they were in the past. So although this is a map, it's one of the earliest maps of London that we've been talking about, we shouldn't think for a second that people were using it to find the Copperplate map or the Civitas Londinium. We shouldn't think for a second that they were using this to find their way round. These are art objects. They were on display, and we can see an example of how that might have looked on the screen here. So this is a slightly later image. It's not. We'll go more into the dating in a moment's time, but it's the only one I could find in our collection. So around 1660, we can see this Dutch gentleman, very well to do. This is his portrait. He's putting his best foot forward. He's in his best clothes. He's well turned out. We see his desk. We see his work, and in the background, slightly muddy, aged photograph. Age reproduction of the painting, but you can see there is a map in the background. So this gives us a sense of how these things would have been used, would be consumed, if we want to sort of use the more scholarly language. So actually, the way we have it displayed at the moment is quite authentic. It's quite true to form. This is what the maps would have been like, and this explains why not many of these maps survive. So in the case of Civitas Londinium, the map that is on display, only 3 examples of this map survive. And that's because for the most part it would have been on a wall, probably wouldn't have been framed, probably would have been displayed on rollers mounted, a bit like you can make out on that image on the left. So they were high value status objects that would have been sort of shown off, but they would have ultimately been ephemeral. So we are very lucky to have the ones that we have. So I said that this is slightly out of date with the map being in 1668. How can we know the date of these things? So we've gone back to the Copperplate map here, not to be don't want to confuse you with what map we're on. How can we tell the date of these maps? Well, we have to do a bit of sleuthing. We have to do a bit of geographical detective work. And what you basically need to do is you need to find a potential early date and a potential late date by knowing when certain kind of key features on the map came into existence. That can be things that were built, or it can be name changes, and you can use that to sort of find your window. If you're interested, there's a complete list of them in this book, Tudor London: A Map and a View, which is available in our library. But I'll just do a few highlights, otherwise we'd be here for a bit longer than is practical. And I'll just give you that, so if you wanted to just mention that in the chat. So 2 of the ways that we can look at to find the earliest date of the Copperplate map are with a place name, and we can see that on the left. Quite hard to read at the best of times, probably even more so on a slide. So you might have to take my word for this, but this text here says Showbury P, and that's that is trying to depict Shrewsbury Place. Shrewsbury Place, or Showbury P, upside down and abbreviated. And Shrewsbury Place used to be known as the Cold Harbour, but was given to the Earl of Shrewsbury on the 30th of June 1553. So this change in place name gives us a sense of what that early date might have been. Obviously, we can't work on just one sort of data point, and indeed some people will have called that Cold Harbour Place long after the name officially changed. I sometimes still call the London Archives London Metropolitan Archives, and probably will be doing so accidentally for a few years to come. So we can kind of build up a few of these examples to give us a sense. And as I say, if you want the complete list, have a look at that book in the library. But another nice example is on the right hand, as you're looking at it on the right hand side of this slide, and that's the Fenchurch Street tenement block. And this actually only just occurred to me now, is another really nice example of what this sort of a 3D topographic view can do for us. So hopefully you can make out that in the middle of this image, so if we start from the left-hand side, we've got a row of houses, we've got what looks like a bit of a yard there, and then we have another sort of row of houses going north to south, and that's actually higher than the rest. So this is the Fenchurch Street tenement block, and we have records that show that this was built 1557 to 1558. So we can see now, can't we, how we're starting to sort of hone in on this early date. And then obviously we have an early date. We also need a later date as well, and there's a couple of ways that we can do that as well. If we look on the left here, we can see St. Botolph without Bishopsgate is going to be our clue, again abbreviated on the map. So to find that, if we start at the bottom, and let's imagine, why not have a bit of fun with me, we're walking through the Bishopsgate, we're heading north, we're just going to turn left into the churchyard of St. Botolph's. So I'll point it out on here, just go up there and turn left. I hope you can follow that okay at home. And we will see in the churchyard there is a cross. This cross was taken down in 1558. There was a wave of iconoclasm, sort of a destruction of religious symbols following the death of Queen Mary I. So this gives us another way that we can date that. If the map had been made much later than this wouldn't have been shown on the map, or probably wouldn't have been shown on the map. It might be more accurate to say. But another big clue for the date of this map that we can put it in probably the 1550s is the Royal Exchange, or in this case the lack thereof Royal Exchange. So the Royal Exchange was built in the last years of the 1560s, opened in 1571, and it was a really celebrated building, a very celebrated building in Elizabeth's reign. It's fair to say it was one of the most important buildings in Elizabethan London, and it's not here. It's not on this map. So we can be sure that had it been built, it would have been included. And I'll show you where it is on the Civitas Londinium map a bit later on. So this gives us a solid sort of age range for this. For this map as sort of 1550s, 1560s, and that's pretty as precise as we can be. And then some people will suggest it was probably made for some official purpose in the reign of Queen Mary, and that sort of educated educated guess is a bit strong. It's a deduction based on the available evidence. And again, a bit of an aside, if anyone's asking, well, what were they doing for why were there no earlier maps than this? Why is the earliest map? It's a question of expense. As we heard, these are expensive sort of art objects. It's a question of printing technology, and basically the way that people would sort of find their way before this is with sort of route descriptions. If you're going from town to town, you would have a written description of, go along this road X many miles until you reach this public house or whatever. A bit like if any of you sort of go on holiday in sort of Spain or similar, and you sort of hire a villa in the mountains, you're given this sort of printed list of where you're going. Turn left at the purple bin, that sort of thing. Or again, another sort of slightly archaic mapping technology. I remember in my younger days, sort of printing out on Google Maps those sort of turn by turn directions. Something a bit like that would have been used to help people find their way. So we've had the Copperplate map. As I say, it's the sort of the ancestor map of Civitas Londinium, and there's another of their sort of ancestors that we're going to look at before we spend a bit more time with Civitas Londinium. And this is one I'm going to really struggle to say. Londinium, Feracissimi, Angliae, Regni, Metropolis. Apologies to all the Latin speakers in the room. That's the best I can do. And this is a sort of a beautiful and lovely thing in its own right. It looks quite big here, actually. I should say it's on a far smaller scale than the Civitas Londinium. This is it's probably in modern terms somewhere between sort of an A4 and A3 sheet of paper today, to give you a sense of what this looked like. And whereas the Copperplate map and Civitas Londinium were sort of large display objects, this would be more something that you would bind into a book. You would have kind of collectors of maps, collectors of prints. So it's still kind of a collectible kind of art object, but used in a different way from the maps that we've looked at already. I'm sure you'll notice that it is coloured. So this would have been hand coloured after its production, and this is basically a reproduction, or a smaller reproduction of the Copperplate map, and we see this a lot in early maps, indeed right into the kind of throughout the 18th and early 19th century. The same map is sort of reused again and again under a different form. Perhaps the same survey is used, some of the same details are changed. There was a very different sort of approach and legal framework around copyright and reproduction. So we see these images kind of go through many iterations and incarnations as well. But we had to go through some sort of fun geographical and historical detective work to date the Copperplate map. We don't have as much luck, I would say. We know this one fairly solidly was published in 1572. We know that because it was this bound volume was effectively a collector's item. It was a published work, so the records exist a lot more, and we have some of the very same features that we'd expect on a map like this that we saw at Copperplate, the various sort of people and things like that. Also these text boxes, the people at the bottom, giving us a sense of how people were dressed, and various decorations at the top as well. The Elizabethan coat of arms on the left, and on the right, obviously the city arms there. An important thing to have in mind when we're thinking about maps is how accurate they are. One of the reasons I'm really fond of maps, they're some of my favourite things to think about and talk about in our collections, is they're this intriguing mix of art and science. And this gives them this air of authority, and it means we trust them, and it's good to trust them. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but you can trust them a little bit too much sometimes, because if you look closely, particularly maps of this vintage, there are various sort of contradictions and, dare I say it, sort of fibs that have been told by the map maker. And there's a really good example of this on this map here. So you hopefully can see on the left hand image that St. Paul's Cathedral in the middle there. That's its Gothic incarnation. Obviously, the incarnation we have today, the Baroque example, was built following the Great Fire of London. But for many centuries, a Gothic cathedral stood at the same site. And like many a good Gothic cathedral, for a long time it had a spire. I say for a long time because sadly the spire was burnt down in 1561. And remember, we said this is 1572 that this map was made, and it's still showing with its spire. So sometimes you might look at a map and think, oh, that's wrong. Maybe I didn't know something that I thought I knew about London. Be careful. Quite often, it's the map that's wrong, not you. It's something to bear in mind. And we can sort of drive that point home a little bit if we compare these two. Remember, it's on the same map. On the right hand side, you might have to take my word for it, because it's quite hard to see at this resolution, but just so you can, if you don't believe me, have a look here. So for the benefit of the people at home, have a look at the image on the right hand side, about the middle of the if we're going from top to bottom, have a look about the middle of the map, slightly to the left. You'll see that there's a sort of a big three-way fork in the road, and there's a triangle there, and trust me on this one, it's showing the Royal Exchange there. The Royal Exchange, remember, opened 1571. The spire of the cathedral burns down 1561. Never existed at the same time. So little things to look out for. And I should say, I'm not disparaging from Matt for doing that. I'm not saying it's inaccurate or wrong. And if anything, it makes me love it even more. Those little kind of quirks and idiosyncrasies that it has. So we've seen how the Copperplate map was the earliest map of London, how that didn't survive in its original form, and then but it was sort of reproduced in this this other smaller map that, of which today, which here we're seeing a 1572 version. So this now brings us sort of up to date, as it were. And what we can see on the screen now is Civitas Londinium. So many words for different types of maps. Civitas Londinium, also called the woodcut map or the Agas map, and this is the map that's on display currently in our iconic area. And don't worry if you can't make it in. It's available online on the London Picture Archive, on Layers of London, and a few other good places as well. So there's plenty of opportunity to see it in person and online. So it's called, say, Civitas Londinium is what we call it, but it's often also called the woodcut map. No prizes, I'm afraid, for guessing why it's called that. It was reproduced using wooden printing blocks, and that distinguishes it, of course, from the copperplate map. So this would still have been an art object. It still would have been sort of an expensive and valuable thing to own, but the woodcut gave a less accurate reproduction, so it wasn't quite the same quality as the copperplate map. So usually wealthy merchants would have been the target audience for a map such as this. It's eight sheets, 6 full size and 2 half size, with the half size sheets being on the western end of the map on the left as you look at it. Excuse me. And this is one of 3 existing copies, so it's a really special thing that we have here. So there's a copy here at the London Archives, there's a copy at the National Archives, and there's a copy in the Pepys Library at Magdalen College in Cambridge. The copy in Magdalen survives because Pepys collected it as part of his personal collection, as I understand it. The National Archives collection probably was kept for some kind of official purpose. Our collection, the one we have in our collection, was purchased by the city in 1841, and I don't know anything else about the provenance of it before that. So as I say, it's a special thing. I'm sometimes asked how many of them would have been printed originally, and it's a hard thing to give an accurate answer to. I think we're talking hundreds, probably not more than 1,000, but I've not really ever found a very satisfactory answer to that. And you would be limited basically by the wear and tear of the printing blocks. Obviously they're used, quite a lot of pressure is put on them when they're inked and pressed and all that sort of thing, so they do damage over time. And indeed some scholars have suggested that the reason we don't see as much on the east of this map as you might expect from other printed sources is actually that's where the damage to the blocks had started the most, or maybe they'd been badly stored and there'd been some kind of water damage or something like that as well. So it is dependent on the way it's been reproduced. So we don't know a huge amount. We don't know a huge amount about why it was made and who made it. As I said, for many years there was this incorrect attribution to the antiquarian mapmaker Ralph Agas, but we don't know. It's as simple as that. Some things are lost to history. One popular theory among sort of map scholars is that it had something to do with the Hanseatic League. The Hanseatic League, a bit of an arcane bit of early modern history, were a group of sort of merchants, international merchants, often known as the Hansa. And they had sort of trading outposts in various cities throughout Europe. There's some suggestion this map was made under their patronage. The evidence for that being that prominently featured on the copperplate and on I can never remember the name of it, London Feracissimi, Angliae, Metropolis, again, apologies for the pronunciation, is the prominent feature of the still yard, or the steel yard, as it would have been known, which was the headquarters of the Hansa in London. So you can see it marked there on both maps. On the left, in the middle, it's really just in the middle of the image on the left-hand side, a stillard, it will be, you might read it as, and then easier to find on the image on the bottom because it's right next to these sort of rogue oxen that are marauding through the Thames. And then the other kind of clue that scholars point to about this possible Hanseatic collection is the 2 text boxes that you might have noticed on the 1572 map. I'll call it that to save your ears from my pronunciation. There's a big text box there, and this is basically singing the praises of the Hanseatic League. So that's often a clue that is used. how can we date it? Well, it gets a bit intriguing. On the one hand, they seem to have told us, which again spoils the fun, but actually this is another example of not entirely trusting things and sometimes having to do a little bit of detective work. So this now we're back on Civitas Londinium. This is the text panel appears on the bottom left-hand side. So as well as the map and everything on it, there's a text panel that has a history. We might put the history in inverted commas, has a history of the foundation of London here. So I'll précis it for you. It's saying that London was founded by Brute the Trojan. This is a mythical king, didn't exist, and then rebuilt by King Lud. Again, another mythical king. I think Ludgate Circus. That sort of that same allusion there. But it's saying that London was built, and this is a mystery I'll come on to in a minute, 2,663 years ago. They've then taken, they do a little bit of maths, and they get, on this map, they get to 1533, but there's actually it's been overwritten and corrected, and in the other two printed versions, it says 2,763 years, and they take that away from how long London is, and they get 1633. Now, I know all of you are asking, who has corrected it and why the discrepancy? And I don't know the answer, which probably pains me even more than it pains you. I did do a little bit of research on it the last time it was on display, and I wasn't able to find a good answer to why they were doing that and who did this. If anyone in the room knows, if anyone in the comments knows, if anyone thinks they know someone that knows, I would love to hear. And I think I'm duty bound to do a little bit more research whilst it's on display. And if I do find the answer, I'll put it out on our social media, because that would be a fun thing to do. So we have this clue for the dating. So it's usually dated as 1633, but we have to be a bit careful, because what we can find with a little bit more detective work. Actually, I'm going to go. Sorry, I've gone a bit out of order there. Let me go back. What we can find with a little bit more detective work is that the 1633 version is actually a later reprint of an earlier version, and the London that we are seeing in the woodcut map is, for the most part, the London very similar to that of the Copperplate, so around 1560, 1570, that sort of feature. And there are a couple of clues on Civitas Londinium that let us see that it's a later version of a earlier map. And again, those clues that say we have to be a little bit careful what we see when dating maps. So the first of these clues is the coat of arms that is displayed. We've seen these coats of arms displayed on a couple of the maps so far. So in the version we have on display of Civitas Londinium, it's the coat of arms of King James. We can see that on example. So this is from Civitas Londinium on the top right-hand side there. But we know that this has basically been inserted on later. Again, it's probably very hard to see on these plates. This is probably when we have an advantage of the people at home. But if you look around it, you can actually see the join. So what will have happened is the woodcut would have been physically cut into, physically removed. That section would have been taken out, and then another section put in. I can see it because I know what I'm looking for, but it might be hard to see from here. But if you're in person, have a look at the real thing, and if you're at home, have a look on London Picture Archive, and you can zoom right in and see that join. So in the original map, they would have featured Elizabeth's arms, which we can see an example of on the left-hand side. I'm really sorry to introduce another map and another material into this already slightly confusing talk. This is from a later 18th century version of the woodcut map, but it's trying to base itself on the Elizabethan city, and this is sometimes called the pewter map. You can see that there, gives you an example of it. An inferior copy, really. We won't spend too much time on it, but again, just labour that point, be really careful with early maps, because they like to trick you, they get reused, all that sort of thing. And this one's available on London Picture Archive as well. So that was an aside, really. So remember that we had the Elizabethan arms originally replaced with the Jacobean arms, but they didn't find all of them, and this is a real Where's Wally moment, because one of these barges is the Royal Barge, and the Royal Barge, fittingly enough, has the coat of arms on it. Sometimes I make people guess, but we can't in this setting. So I'll let you know that this is the royal barge here. If we zoom in, you can see the soldiers, see that, and hopefully you can make out in the middle, right in the middle here, that the royal barge is fittingly enough showing the royal coat of arms, and actually that coat of arms is the Elizabethan arms, and we can tell that if we see that the four sections that it's divided into. These squiggles are the three lions, the three lions on the England football shirt, cricket shirt, and these are the fleur-de-lis, which it's Elizabeth claiming the French throne. But obviously, if that was the Stuart arms, we'd be seeing the harp and the other features as well there. So I think we can forgive them. I wouldn't fancy cutting that out of a woodcut map either. And then the other important thing, and I promised you I'd come back to it. The other big addition to the 1633 woodcut map that wouldn't have been there in the earlier version, and I don't think I said this, I should say none of the early versions of this map still exist that we know of. Maybe there's one hiding somewhere. That would be a great day if it was the case. But we can see now on the left. So I'm using the pewter map again as an example. This is where the Royal Exchange should be. So if you're joining us from home, on the left-hand side of the middle of the image, you see that road in the middle there. Just as if we're approaching from the left-hand side of the map, where you would turn left there, that is the site of the Royal Exchange. You can't see it on the map on the left. Similar thing though on the right, although this time we're in the middle of the map. Coming from the left, there's sort of a triangle of roads there. You can see that the texture of the map is very different. It's houses for the most part, and then something's been plonked on top of that. So that's the Royal Exchange having been added in to the Civitas Londinium as well. And this is just a slide again, another close-up of the Royal Exchange there, just to enjoy some of the detail of this this map again, to sort of celebrate this sort of fun topographical view. We can see St Paul's there. You're all experts now. Notice no spire, so they got that one right on this at least. That's the coat of arms, and I'm sure there was a reason I put that one in specifically, but I can't remember what it was. But it does give us a nice close-up of the river and the steps along the river there. As I say, and I wanted to return to this because one of the really celebrated features about this map is the little details that it has put in, particularly outside the city. So on the left, this is Copperplate. On the right, it's Civitas Londinium. Again, just to show you both, really. Interesting, of course, because these will both be very urban, built-up areas today. But when these maps were built, it's countryside. Gives us a sense of a very different kind of London geography. Not that many years ago, really, in the grand scheme of things. But really, I wanted to show you this because of the figures that we can see. You'll often hear the figures described. We can see them just north of the wall here on the image of the left. You can see people hanging out clothes and picking out clothes, described as people doing their laundry. I think that's probably not the best way to think about it. I think these are people working. These are people working in the cloth and particularly the wool trade. This at this time, England, was known for its wool trade. That was its big export. That's one of the big things that it's done. And so I think what we're seeing here is industry rather than something domestic. And one of the clues to that is, as well as the kind of the full bits of cloth and the clothes, and it's easier to see, I think, on the Copperplate map because of the different scale, the smaller scale, so the images seem bigger. Can you see right in the middle there? Just pointing there, right in the middle there, that clothes being pegged out. So these are tenterhooks. You might have heard the expression "waiting on tenterhooks." This is part of the kind of the cloth making practice, where you pull something tight and has to be sort of stretched for a few days as part of this process. So that's my interpretation. This is more of a kind of industrial rather than industrial is not the right word, economic activity rather than a domestic activity. And the other thing that's often pointed out is the archery that's going on. Again, easier to see in the map. On the left-hand side, see the figures right at the top there practicing archery. Again, sometimes seen as an incidental pastime. Again, I would argue that there is an interpretation that this is deliberate. Remember, everything that you put on a map has to, someone's chosen to do it. It's chosen to say something. This is an art object, as we've heard. They're not necessarily hugely concerned with accuracy. It's more about making a statement. And alongside the cloth trade there, this is a way of sort of showing the kind of the prowess and the power of the city. It says, less so now, but certainly in sort of the centuries gone by, England was famed for its archery. That was a sign of its prowess. So there's an element of sort of flattery that's going on in this map as well. But we do know, I should say, that the people did practice their archery in the fields north of the city, and you do hear occasions of people sort of going about their business and sort of arrows sort of flitting by, and some near misses as well. So that's not to say that's sort of inaccurate, just that it's probably more of a deliberate inclusion than sometimes it's made out to be. And a nice little thing that would be wrong, I think, a shame not to point out, is the doghouse as well. So quite literally, this is the doghouse. This is the Lord Mayor's doghouse. You can see it on both maps, and this is where the Lord Mayor would keep their hunting dogs. It's not a very nice fact of early medieval London that the blood sports were very popular. I certainly don't like the idea of it, and that's nowhere more clear. And in what will be the last slide today on the south bank of the river. So you can see here, or let me read it for you. That says the bull baiting, and this says the bear baiting. So blood sports were very popular. Bull baiting in particular was almost like the national sport. So popular that the arenas were built for that purpose on the south bank. Again, a little moment of caution with these maps. And as I'm doing it, I just want to say caution on the scale. You can hopefully see there is a very large bull in the bull baiting arena there, and you can see the dogs. These would have been English mastiffs in their kennels up and down there. That there are you will read various and see various depictions of the particular arrangement of these theatres. So John Stowe, who was an antiquarian, so who produced a famous survey of London. This is a written description of London about this time, has a slightly contradictory description of what the South Bank looks like at this time. There's a view by Vischer, the so-called Vischer panorama, again similar to this date, which has the labels of these buildings in different locations as well. So that's not to say that anything is wrong or right, but to just give you that sense of the nuance within the different sources. And this is, this is the south bank of the Thames. This would become the location of the famous theatres, including the Globe Theatre as well. Obviously most famous for its association with William Shakespeare. And just to tie things up, it's really the Shakespeare's deed that means we're lucky to have this map out at the moment as well. Kind of the two things speaking to each other. So if you want to find out a little bit more about today, we focus maybe a bit more about the maps and how they were made and how they fit together. In September, we'll be coming back to sort of London this period, looking at sort of Shakespeare's life in London, and we'll get a bit more of the sense of the everyday and the character of the city in that talk as well. So that's that will be I want to say the second Thursday. Yes, that'll be the second Thursday in September. So I hope some of you can join us with that. Actually, to be precise, it's the 11th of September. So hopefully some of you will be able to join us for that, either in person or at home. But until then, are there any questions about anything that we've seen today that I can answer for you?
Probably something which is obvious to others, but obviously they didn't have flight. Then, so how did they know the layout?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll just repeat that just so everyone who are hoping it. Yeah. So the question was, obviously they don't have flight. So how do they know the layout? That's a great question. So it'd be a combination of finding the highest point that you could find. So Southwark Cathedral was a popular site, and then these do actually take place with an imaginary view. So you'd find a high point, and then you'd sort of pretend that you could see it, and you'd almost be extrapolating from what you've measured on the ground to go from there.
Right,
Yeah. Thank you. I think there's a question here as well.
I'm going to ask about the views of the Copperplate map.
Mm-hmm.
And I've often wondered this before, because they weren't, when they were found in the 1960s, they weren't printed from, presumably. They were.
Oh no, great question. So the question was, were the Copperplate map? They effectively, how do we? I'm assuming the question is, how do we have them here?
How do you have those
How do we have the images? Yes. So I'll just repeat that, because I'm not sure how much comes through the people at home. So the question is, if the copperplate map, if the copper plates were discovered, not the prints, how do we have the images? And yes, you're quite right, answered your own question. It's a photography thing. So in theory, you could print with the plates, but it wouldn't be a very good idea. There'd be a real risk of damaging them. So effectively, they've been photographed and then traced digitally. I'm not sure any more of the details than that, but yes, it's a photography thing rather than a physical printing thing. Yeah, indeed, actually, 1960s, they might have actually just been physically traced and then reproduced photomechanically. I think that's actually would be more likely. Yeah, thank you.
Or transferred. Or turned negative.
Yes, that's right. Transferred as a negative. So I'm not sure the technical details, but yes, photography somehow, and certainly they weren't printed from. Yeah, great.
What kind of materials did they use to print the maps? Let's say the copper plates. Was it leather? Was it the earliest form of paper?
Oh yes.
What were they transferred onto?
Okay, great. Yeah. So I should have said this. Apologies. The maps are made of paper. They're all paper. They're all paper maps. Yeah. Quite good quality paper. One of the sort of quirks is that because paper was harder to make, more valuable, when this was made, tends to be better quality than a lot of the paper that we use today, because today paper is a disposable material of convenience. I think nothing of printing these out, a little bit about thinking these out and then throwing them away, but it would have been a very valuable material then. So it's paper, nice quality paper, and I should say it's been recently conserved as well. So the Civitas Londinium went on display about 3 years ago for the first time in a long time, and as part of that, it was cleaned and all that sort of thing. So it's looking in particularly good nick at the moment. Yeah, thank you. Are there any questions from the people at home? Sorry. Okay, if there are questions from people at home, please feel free to type them in. I'll give you a minute because there is a bit of a delay on the stream, and also I'm not the world's quickest typist, so no one likes typing under pressure. So we'll just check in with the people at home. But are there any more questions from people in the room? Yes.
And this is from your last image, the one for there.
Yeah.
But,
right, that way. Sorry. Yeah.
The spelling of field.
Ah, yes.
That seems quite modern. F-I-E-L-D.
And yeah, indeed, that's what I've actually just spotted, and I had not spotted this before. We've got F-I-E-L-D on the left, and we've got F-Y-L-D on the right.
Seems like a modern spelling of it.
It does. I don't know. You've stumped me. I don't know. Again, I'll always, as I said, I have to sort of spread my knowledge quite thin. So I don't know. I wouldn't have suspected that they would have changed it.
Different as well.
Which the
text from doghouse to all parts looks slightly different.
Yes. Yes.
It's more printed than.
Yes, it does.
Sorry, just an observation.
No, it's great. I don't know. Yeah, that's a really good observation. I don't know if that's a quirk of the Moorgate's different. Yes.
Moorgate's got an O-R-E-L as well.
Yeah, I don't know. That's great. Yeah, that's just As I say, they're endlessly fascinating with these because there's so much detail that you can spot. And I've been talking about these for a few years now, and almost every time I get them out, I notice something new. So thank you for that. That's great. I hope everyone at home caught that. The observation was that field is spelt what looks like a modern spelling, and it feels like a modern typeface. So we were just wondering, is that the authentic typography or something that's been added later as part of the reproduction process? And we also just spotted that field and field have different spellings. We have the Y spelling and the IE spelling on the different maps. Thank you. Yes.
Recently, that in this period, people wrote as they heard the sounds, and so it would be phonetic, so it would be completely understandable, but it would be spelled differently.
Yeah, absolutely. So the
I do field.
yeah.
I mean, it depends. Maybe if you've got accent, you go field.
Yeah.
You put a Y.
Yeah. So there was a follow-up on that last point with Ben Beep at home that that people spelt phonetically, and so that can explain the difference there. And we're certainly in a period of non-standard spelling. There's that famous thing about Shakespeare that Shakespeare couldn't spell in big inverted commas. But that point about the accent is absolutely right, in that we have I forget what it is, but on one of the paleography courses that we do, there's a piece of handwriting from about this time, maybe slightly later, that you have to try and transcribe. And the challenge there is the spelling, because it's basically spelt in a West Country accent. And that is, so it's covered, but I won't do it. No, I won't try and do it. You can't do an accent well, don't do it at all. But it's spelt as it would sound spoken in that accent. And we also get into really interesting discussion around, everyone would have had a different accent then. So I forget quite when it came in, but there's this thing called the Great Vowel Shift, where basically at Shakespeare's time, most people would have sounded a lot more like what we think of today as a West Country accent. And indeed, some of Shakespeare's rhymes only work if they're spoken in that way, because people spoke differently. So great. I'm assuming there's no more questions from home, Zoe? Any more questions from?
I was just going to say that, that's obviously where it comes from, doesn't it? You're in the doghouse.
Yes, yeah, you're in. The observation was that in the doghouse, you're in the kennel. Yeah, you're sleeping outside. Yeah, absolutely. And I believe there's a question from home. Sorry.
Yeah. So, is there any evidence maps were used in legal proceedings, such as property boundary disputes?
Oh, great question. So, did everyone hear that? Is there any evidence that maps were used in property in legal proceedings such as property disputes? Yes, there is. So, a bit later on, and as we alluded to earlier, the reason that maps have a map today, as we're used to seeing it, has the top-down view, is because after the Great Fire of London, there was a dispute about the boundaries, various properties. A huge job sort of compensating people for the damage, and in order to do that, and the advantage of a top-down view as opposed to this view is a top-down view gives an accurate depiction of the ground plot. So in that sense, the map making convention we have today is based on that, and more specifically. And I'm afraid I can't think of the exact date off the top of my head, but we could find it for you. There is an example from a similar time to this, and I'm afraid I can't remember to give you chapter and verse, of it's what we call a manuscript map, so it's a hand-drawn map, not reproduced, was produced to not so much solve, but to illustrate a legal dispute between the City of London and Southwark, basically about a right of way. Again, this is slightly all from memory, so don't take this as gospel. But if I remember correctly, the City of London entered a legal dispute with Southwark because Southwark had opened up a right of a road, which meant that if you're coming to London from the south, across London Bridge, you could basically take a shortcut to Southwark, and you'd go to their pubs and their inns and stay in their hotels, to put it in the modern terms, rather than carrying on into the city. And that's illustrated in a map form. And they went so far as sort of barring the way, and it sort of says this is the road with the chain on it. It was on display in our magnificent maps of London exhibition a few years ago. So if that's of particular interest to the questioner, please feel free to write in, and we can find you that, we can give you the full reference to that. So yes, that's an example of that, and that is a whole other really lovely source of early maps, actually manuscript maps. It's worth talking about as well. So thank you for that question. Any more questions from home? Any more questions from?
What does the river or stream, whatever it is?
On the map that's on the,
Yeah.
which one, sorry?
Well, along just north of the wall and then up.
Can't quite see where you mean. Sorry for people at home, I'll fill you in, don't worry. This?
No, on this, the map on the left. Well, it's on both of them.
Is it?
Sorry, no, there's a river.
Oh, here. Oh, yes. Sorry. Yeah, being silly.
It's got bridges over it.
Yes. So these are the gates. So this is, I'm not sure exactly which. It might be the River Fleet. It might be Houndsditch. I can't quite wrap my geography around it.
I think it's the Fleet.
Fleet. Yes, I think so. No. Fleet would be this side, wouldn't it?
Oh.
I think it's Houndsditch. So the question was, what's the river on the right hand side of the Copperplate, so the map on the left, there's a bridge over it. I think that's Houndsditch, but I'm not sure, because the Fleet would be the other side, because it basically runs near where we are here. So I think Houndsditch. A good way to find that out, a little plug, would be Layers of London. The best way with any of these what's there now questions is there's a website called Layers of London. Some of you will be familiar with it, I'm sure. And what Layers of London has, it has a series of historical maps that have been what we call geo-rectified. So they've been plonked on top of a modern map, and you can basically put the historical map on and then sort of pull a slider back, and it kind of fades through. So that's the best way to answer those sort of those questions. It's a lot easier than it sounds, trust me. Oh, did it not quite work for you? That's a shame. Yeah, but I'm pretty sure that's Houndsditch. Yeah, thank you. I think we'll draw things to a close. Thank you, say, for coming to see us on a hot day in the middle of the day. I hope the map makes it worth it, and it's nice for me, because this is actually one of my sort of favourite things we have in the collection. So it's always a pleasure talking about it. So thank you all for coming, and thank you for joining us at home as well.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Cool.